Well, hello everybody, this is Angel Michael. Welcome to my channel. Today my topic is an important topic, but it's also a bit controversial. My topic is biblical marriage versus state-sanctioned marriage. So, what entails biblical marriage compared to state-sanctioned marriage? Well, biblical marriage, which can also be called legally common law marriage, is the marriage between a man and a wife and the Creator, or God. There is no legal document that is filed with the state with the common law marriage. State-regulated marriage, on the other hand, involves filing a legal binding document with the state. And according to the Illinois Appellate Court, and this is from a judgment from the Appellate Court from 1997, they state, marriage is a civil contract to which there are three parties, the husband, the wife, and the state. Now, this is on the Appellate Court's website of the state of Illinois. The court case is Van Coten versus Van Coten, and it continues to go further by stating, taking all of this into consideration. And this is a quote from the judge. This is a judgment from the judge. The question no longer is whether the state has an interest or place in disputes, such as the one at bar, but it becomes a question of timing and necessity. The state is a silent partner in the family who is not active in the everyday running of the state, but becomes active and exercises its power and authority only when necessary to protect some important interest of the family. This public interest is what allows the state to intervene in certain situations to protect the interests of members of the family. Also, this further states by the judge now, the state has a wide range of power for limiting parental freedom and authority in things affecting the child's welfare. In fact, the entire familial relationship involves the state. That is also from that same website, Prince 321 U.S. Statute 167. Well now, the court sure seem to offer an opinion about your child, that your child is owned by the state. But heck, what should we the people, not people with a capital P, expect? When such authority and jurisdiction is not just arbitrarily handed over to a bunch of attorneys running around in black muumuus with little wooden hammers yelling that they rule supreme in their house of judicial worship, simply because the state allows them to presume such authority and jurisdiction. I suppose those people who consent to this charade get just what they deserve, slavery through a bondage contract. But then, when the president of the country is also a lawyer, along with his wife, and for that matter, more than half of the U.S. presidents, 56 out of 100 senators, over 35% of Congress, both speakers of the House, and most of the state governors in office today are all bar attorney lawyers. I suppose we shouldn't be at all surprised that the opinion of the Bar Association is the law of the land. Of course, the above opinion is not just some isolated case. This opinion is quite general in its purview and quite common in its legal application. In fact, it is the very basis of the criminal racket we call the dreaded CPS, or the Child Protection Services, who claims its overreaching authority from the Federal Health and Human Services Department, HHS, as it legally kidnaps children. So where else can we find such blatant power abuses so absolutely? How about in the case of Meadow versus Meadow, August 2008, in the Court of Civil Appeals of Alabama? They state, the judge states, I should say, the primary control and custody of infants is with the government. Tillman versus Roberts, 108-62. There is no wider area for the exercise of judicial discretion than that of providing for and protecting the best interests of children. Ex parte Handley and that's from Alabama court case of 1984. The court stands in the position of parents patria of children. That's just basically legal speak for saying that the state is the parent of children. And that's from the court case Ayers versus Kelly, 1969. We held that the best interest of the child took precedence over the parent's right to travel. And then we have this other case, Everett. I think that's also from 1969. In 1984, the Court of Appeals of Idaho ruled that the state had a compelling governmental interest that justified restricting the residence of the custodial parent, holding that the best interest of a child had priority over the parent's right to travel. Now, the reason why I'm talking about the courts having power over the children, and this is supposed to be about marriage, is I just wanted to show you the wide range power that the federal government and even the state government claims over your individual life. So if they have control, they claim they have power over your children, you know they're going to have power over your marriage. And I can keep going on. I mean, I will put a link out on this to this website showing all these court cases. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time reading every single one of them. But let's just read a little bit about what they think about us as people in general. And I want to get to that. Okay. Oh, here we go. The state is the father and mother of the child, and the natural parents are not entitled to custody, except upon the state's beneficial recognition that natural parents presumably will be the best of its citizens to delegate its custodial powers. The law devolves the custody of infant children upon their parents, not so much upon the ground of natural right in the latter, as because the interests of the children and the good of the public will, as a general rule, be thereby promoted. And that's from a court case from 1939. Wait a minute, you say, well, this doesn't sound very constitutional to me. Oh, you mean that mythical and, more importantly, interpretable in court opinion, that is, document that you believe gives you rights? Silly. Rabbit's tricks are for kids. In reality, everything that happens is, in fact, constitutional, as long as the court, who is an attorney and a black moo-moo, says it is constitutional. From within its, or his, her, I'd say their, them, or an it. I don't know, the way these people are today, you can't tell the difference between a male and female opinion. In the end, you have only one right, and that right is the right of non-consent. Consent is the most important legal term you can possibly ever comprehend. But don't take my word for it. Here are a few more instances of law case which let you know that the Constitution simply does not apply to you in the corporate world of commercial or copyrighted code. Here's what they say here. This is from, let's see, I'm not sure what year this is, but it's from a court case, Paddleford, Fay and Company. The judge's statement says, indeed, no private person has a right to complain by suit in court on the ground of a breach of the Constitution. The Constitution, it is true, is a compact, but he is not party to it. Remember, the word person refers to your veil of artificial personhood, that is, your straw man, if you will. The court will never refer to you in the sense that you are a living, breathing, sentient being with God-given rights that cannot be taken away, but instead relies on your presumed consent as the physical representation of your your corporate self, called a person, and it's in capital letters. It's defined in the U.S. Code as the individual, association, corporation, or group, etc. It's not defined as people, unless these people are a group of persons, in which case, as in the Constitution, the word people is capitalized. For example, we, the people, is capitalized, referring to the men who signed the Constitution, and whom were the only men for which the Constitution held under contract with any authority. The Constitution has no authority except that for which the court passes judgment or opinion upon. So, that's a mouthful. The people of the United States reside within any state are subject to two governments, one state and the other national, but there need be no conflict. Now, these are words from the court. No conflict between the two. The powers which one possesses, the other does not. They are established for different purposes and have separate jurisdictions. Together they make one whole, and furnish the people of the U.S. with a complete government ample for the protection of all rights at home and abroad. True, it may sometimes happen that a person is amenable to both jurisdictions for one and the same act. It's the natural consequences of a citizenship which owes allegiance to two sovereignties and claims protection from both. The citizen cannot complain because he has voluntarily submitted himself to such a form of government. That is from a direct quote from the Supreme Court in a case called U.S. versus Cruikshank. Well, there you have it. Even the Supreme Court, which has mistakenly translated the word supreme to mean that these 7 appointed justices who pass opinion upon the masses of consenting citizens, and that's in quotations, are more supreme than even God himself. These men and women who are not voted into this position of power in any way by the people, but instead are appointed by the President of the United States, which is nothing but a corporation, these self-imposed deities, clearly state here they are the law of the land, and that the natural consequences of citizenship is for the people to be under their supreme opinion. Well, I for one do not voluntarily submit to the opinions of these megalomaniacs any longer, and for the record, as a free man, with God as my witness, I do not consent, and neither should you. And here's another thing about children. Children are a big business for government. In 1974, the Adoption and Safe Families Act created federal aid in the form of financial incentive to the states that increase adoption numbers. Local CPS must therefore get more children, and they consider to be merchandise. Funding becomes available to the states, to the CPS agents, to the foster families when children are placed in foster homes or mental homes and medicated against the parents' will. Poor children are often targeted because they do not have the wherewithal to hire an attorney to fight the system. 6 times more children die in foster care than in the public at large. Yet more and more children are put in foster care as it's very profitable. Not to mention the child trafficking that takes place through CPS. Children are used as either personal benefit and a form of entrapment to keep the powerful in line. Former Georgia state senator and her husband were gunned down for exposing the CPS, the corrupt business of CPS, that is. Okay, now I said all of that referring to the CPS and the state, and gave you all these court cases to tell you that this is how the state views us as individuals. If you want to get married, which I have no problem with anybody getting married, do so, but do it as a common law marriage. That means you do not fill out any paperwork with the state. Do you think our forefathers filled out paperwork with the state? No, they did not. If they filled out any paperwork at all, it was probably a piece of document, like a will. And they didn't go to a lawyer. They had somebody witness it, just like you would, you do that today, but you have to usually go to a lawyer to do it. But the only people that during the wedding ceremony that were there was the pastor, the family members, and the other witnesses, the husband and wife. And that's who the contract was for. But today, when you get a state license, it involves, the husband and wife and the state. And I went through all this other stuff talking about the idea of you being a person, a legal term. Actually, the person stands for a non-entity, a corporation. That's how the government actually sees people. We're commodities to them. And that's how the elites, get away with it. They're the ones in charge. The elites basically state that, they have the power and the money, and it doesn't matter who's in Washington D.C. because they tell them what to do. So the reason why I'm telling you all that is because once you give your rights over to the government, they can treat you however you please. That's the reason why there's so many abuses in the court system. People don't know their rights, and when you sign these documents, you've signed your rights away. If you want to get married, go right ahead, but do not, I repeat, do not fill out a document with the state. You are basically giving all your rights away, and they can do whatever they want to you. And when your children are born, you really do not need to get a birth certificate. When you fill out a birth certificate, you're basically giving the rights of your child away to the government. They state right on the birth certificate, and I think they use capital letters. Whenever they do that, you're not considered a person when they do that. That's their weird way of doing it, so they can claim that they pretty much own you. So where does all this come from? Well, I've done some other research, and I don't have time to tell you exactly where that is, but without taking up a whole lot of my time. But all of this comes from the Vatican. The Vatican is the entity that's been doing this for generations. They actually claim that they own people everywhere. I remember seeing some other videos. It's kind of complicated how they get away with doing it. But they have all these lawyers at the Vatican, and they fill out what's called an unum sanctum, basically stating that they own everything. They own the property, they own the individuals, everything. And you say, well, nobody owns me. Well, you just think about it, though. If you don't pay your taxes, they're going to come and get you, put you in jail. So you really have no rights. Even that piece of property that you think you own is not yours. Yeah, you get a mortgage on a house. You finally finish paying it off. Well, you still got to pay taxes, and if you don't pay taxes on it, you forfeit it. It's no longer your property. It really isn't your property to begin with. The Vatican considers it to be their property. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. It's the corrupt system that we're living under. And people don't know it, and most people really don't care. They're just living their lives, and every time you turn around, the government's taking more rights away from people, and they just ignore it. Unless it affects them directly. And of course, a lot of people, MGTOW guys, are finding this out really terribly when they go to a divorce court, and if their wife decides to be really nasty about it and wants to take the man's rights away, not allow him to see his children, then get away with it. Of course, it goes the other way as well. If the government decides that they want to take your children away from you, whether you've abused them or not, they can do so to make extra money. And there's nothing really you can do about it unless you have money and can fight them. Just like I was talking about in these court cases. CPS can show up at your doorstep, take those children away, and anybody who wants to make a complaint, they don't even have to give their name. They just call a CPS on the phone and say, well, I saw so-and-so hitting their children or abusing their children. They don't even have to tell them, give them their name. It's just anonymous, and they just come pick them up and take them away. So basically, they consider you and your children their property. So whenever you fill out any paperwork with the state, make sure that you read the fine print, read all of it, and do not, I repeat, do not, two pieces of documents you do not need to have. You do not need a marriage license, and you do not need to have a birth certificate. Of course, they're going to say, well, you got to have that in order to get your driver's license. Well, I mean, we have consented to all of these stupid rules and regulations to basically make us all slaves to the government. That's basically what we have done. But if you really dig deep, they do not need to actually have that information. I mean, I don't have time to go deeper, but even the IRS is not a legitimate organization. But okay, so what is my point with this video? And what I'm trying to make here is again the difference between biblical marriage and state sanctioned marriage. Biblical marriage you can also call it common law marriage. Is just the marriage between the husband and wife where there is a preacher present. There does not need to be a legal document. You can sign a document, but you don't need to have a state person. I wouldn't have a state person to sign that document, because common law is acknowledged as an actual marriage both in the United States and in Great Britain. So you don't need to go to the state to fill out a state licensed marriage document, because once you do, you're given your rights, both you and your husband and your children. All those rights are being given over to the government. Don't believe me? I'm going to put links here to the website. You can do your own research. You're basically putting yourself in harm's way by signing over your life pretty much to the state, making yourself basically a piece of property to the state. But anyway, these court cases that I've talked about, again, I'll put a link there where you can look up these things for yourself and find out everything I said is true. So my question to you would be, would you really, if you want to get married, do you really want to sign your life away to the federal government or the state government so they can do with you as they please? They basically consider you as nothing more than property and your children. And then you wonder why we don't have people, especially men, who want to get married. There's no way in the world that I want to get a state licensure after reading this information. This is crazy. And I'm sorry, but my children as well, if I were to have children, my children do not belong to the state. They belong, I mean, they're not property anyway. I don't mean that way. But they are part of me. You know, they're my flesh and blood. They do not belong to the federal government. Okay, so in closing, just want to let you know that be careful in any of your dealings with the federal government or even the state government. Make sure you read every little fine detail. If you don't understand anything, look it up, and because sometimes they use a lot of the legal terms that most people don't understand what they mean. Do some research before you sign in these documents. And some of this stuff is really kind of fishy. They know how to take advantage of people. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.